All right. So we are studying Narada Bhakti Sutra and almost towards the end of it. Last day we saw Narada said that a devotee should refrain from vain argument, but rather should study and reflect those literature which deal with bhakti and those activities which are conducive for bhakti. He also said that if we can go beyond the daily anxieties, worries, stress, we can have much more time and energy at our disposal, and such available time should be properly used by an aspiring devotee. Ardhakshanam, he said, even half a moment should not be wasted. So it is not to be taken so literally. We say that it means utilize every available moment for spiritual practice. Now, today we shall take two aphorisms 78 and 79. He will speak some more values and attitudes that a devotee should have in their spiritual practices. So first 78, I'm sharing the screen with you. Okay. Ahimsa, Satya, Shaucha, Daya, Astikyo, Adi, Charitrani, Paripalo, Niyani. Let's recite it together. Ahimsa, Satya, Shaucha, Daya, Astikyo, Adi, Charitrani, Paripala, Niyani. And the syntax of this aphorism is very simple. That is, they are as the words appear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have never come across any aphorism so far which the syntax is so similar in Sanskrit and English. So one is ahimsa, non-violence; satya, truthfulness; shaucha, cleanliness; daya, compassion; astikya, faith in spirituality; adi, adi means etc. Charitrani are the virtues, pari, pala, niya, ni, that should be upheld. Non-violence, truthfulness, cleanliness, compassion, faith in spirituality, etc. are the virtues that should be upheld. So we know, or we have seen, that in every spiritual path, there are some core practices and there are some auxiliary practices, right? For example, Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, or path of Jnana Yoga, the core practice is what? Yes, unmute and answer.
Meditation.
Shravana Manana Nididhyasana.
Right, Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, right. And what are the supplementary practices? Auxiliary practices for that?
Rituals, practicing.
Shamadamadi Shat Sampatti.
Shamadamadi Shatsampatti is close, but
Sadhana
don't you?
Chatushtaya.
Sadhana Chatushtaya. Good, thank you. Sadhana Chatushtaya are the supplementary practices. Aparakshadabhuti we studied, if you remember, that start with Sadhana Chatushtaya. 4 spiritual practices, right? Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhamadi, Shatsampatti, and Mokshatva. Right. All right. Then in yoga, in Patanjali Yoga, what are the main practices?
Ashtanga Yoga.
Ashtanga Yoga is not the main practice. That is what I'm coming to. Yes.
Chittavitti Nirodha.
Chittavitti Nirodha is the goal. And what are the practices?
Yama Niyama.
Yama Niyama is part of Ashtanga Yoga.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Last 3 of the Ashtanga Yoga, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. Okay. They are called Antaranga Sadhana. That is the innermost or core sadhana of Raj Yoga. Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And Yama Niyama are Pratyahara, Asana. These are supplementary. Okay. These are auxiliary sadhana. And in Bhakti, main sadhanas, Narada has already pointed out, right? Puja, it may be affinity or a likeness for talking about God and listening to discourses, studying Bhakti scriptures and life of the divine incarnations, singing, chanting, and also holy company of the other spiritual aspirants, company of the advanced practitioners. These were the core practices of Bhakti path, Bhakti Yoga. And now Narada will be speaking about the supplementary practices of Bhakti Yoga. The question is, why these supplementary practices? In next, this aphorism speaks about some supplementary practices like ahimsa, non-violence, truthfulness, then cleanliness, compassion, faith in spirituality, etc. So we see many of the practices of yama and niyama, which are part of Ashtanga Yoga, are included here. The question is, why it is necessary to have these 4 practices? We are interested in Bhakti. So let us do Bhakti. Let us sing God's name, take God's name, read about God's Leela, pastime. Okay, singing God's name, bhajan, chanting. So why these core practices? And why these auxiliary practices? Why are they needed?
They help purify the mind so that you can do the higher things.
Right. Any other insight?
To prepare the mind and body for the higher truth.
Right. So as when we study Aphorism, several times I repeated this point, that all the auxiliary practices of Sadhana Chatushtaya or Yama Niyama, they have 2 goals in mind. One is make the mind tranquil. Okay, make the mind tranquil. Secondly, make the mind one-pointed. Tranquility and one-pointedness. These are the 2 goals of the all auxiliary disciplines. With that kind of mind, we can do even without these practices, but they will be more beneficial when our mind is tranquil and one-pointed. With such a mind, all the spiritual practices, whether it is Bhakti Yoga, whether it is Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, or Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, all of them become fruitful. That's why we see that Advaita Vedanta, all the text, they start with Sadhana Chatushtaya. Okay. The Vichara, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana comes much later. Okay. Much later. And in this connection, we should remember that there are different types of adhikaris, types of eligibility. Okay. There are some very rare types of individuals who don't require these auxiliary practices. They are so prepared that they can directly go to Shravana Manana Nididhyasana or Dharana Dhyana Samadhi or Abhyasa Vairagya or simply Bhakti Yoga. All these auxiliary practices are not needed. But for most of us, practically all of us, we need these auxiliary practices to have a right frame of mind with which we can do spiritual practices. So that is why in all faith traditions, we find there will be always some ethical values, moral values, which will be emphasized. Because without that, spiritual practices won't give much result. Sri Ramakrishna used to give a great example. He used to say that many people we see doing bhakti practices. For example, doing japa, chanting. But even after years, they are not making any progress. Why it is so? Someone asked Sri Ramakrishna this question. Why it is so after practice of so many years of taking God's name, why we see there is no change in the person? Sri Ramakrishna said that if a boat which is anchored, no matter how much you row, how hard, how fast you row, the boat won't move. Okay. So the point was this: if our mind is not are not made prepared with these moral practices and ethical practices, then spiritual disciplines will be doing, but progress won't be much. So here comes the question of these moral principles or auxiliary practices. For example, take ahimsa. Okay, ahimsa is against himsa. For example, if we are harboring feeling of hurting others, having enmity, and that is in our mind, playing within our mind. So what we'll have will be hatred and conflict in our mind. Okay. With such a mind, whenever we try to do some spiritual practices, we'll see that those conflicts, unresolved conflicts, those ill feelings are coming more when we are, say, sitting for meditation. Okay. So point is, when we are sitting for meditation, we should have a mind which is not conflicted with such negative feelings. So also, if we say, we have, for example, today's, I have said so many false words. I have not been truthful. So it will be pinching my conscience. So the mind that with which I will be doing my spiritual practice won't be full there. There will be this inner conflict going on. So but that is not only enough, that not to not harboring feeling of injuring others, that is ahimsa, or truthful, satya, these are not enough. Bhakta has to go further. Okay, for example, purity, saucha, physical and mental. We shall see them in detail in a moment. Daya, compassion, and faith in spiritual reality. When we practice these virtues, what happens is in the technical terms, our mind becomes sattvic. Okay, in terms of Patanjali Yoga, our mind becomes sattvic. The more we practice these things, mind naturally is sattvic, but it is mixed with rajas and tamas. And rajas and tamas are the impurities. The more we practice these virtues, mind becomes sattvic. And the upshot of a sattvic mind is a cheerful mind. A cheerful mind. Okay. And with such cheerful mind, bhakti yoga, or for that matter, any other yoga with a sattvic mind becomes much more beneficial, much more fruitful. Okay. So that is why we need to have these moral disciplines for any spiritual paths in any faith tradition. So ahimsa, we know ahimsa is non-violence. Himsa is violence, ahimsa is non-violence. And it is at all the levels, physical, verbal, and mental. That is, not hurting anyone physically, not hurting anyone by my speech, and not harboring enmity, or not even thinking in mind the ill fate of someone. Okay, let that person go go ruined. Let that person, let injury befall on that person. That kind of feeling is also himsa, not only physically but verbally and also mentally. Mentally also harboring these thoughts are himsa, and not doing that is ahimsa. The question is it at all possible not to injure others? At all possible? For example, Swami Vivekananda gives this example. When we are speaking, as I am speaking, I am killing millions of microbes. Microbes we are killing. When we are walking, without our knowledge, probably we are walking over microorganisms. So that is also a kind of himsa we are doing. We are injuring others. So is it at all possible to not injure anybody? So the point is not intentionally hurting or injuring others, and not consciously hurting others. Unconsciously, it might happen unconsciously, but consciously and intentionally, we should not injure others, and trying to avoid harming others as much as possible. That is the, we should say, yardstick with which we should measure what ahimsa is. And ahimsa is called to be a sarvabhauma dharma, that is a universal virtue. Virtue of all virtues, that is, it is a non-negotiable virtue. Every other virtue is subservient to it. So this is the most important virtue, ahimsa. Second is satya. Satya means truthfulness. And definition Shankaracharya gives in Bhagavad Gita. Reporting things as they have been seen, heard, read, or understood. Okay. Reporting, telling others things as I have seen, as I have heard, as I have read, or as I have understood it. That is called truthfulness. And Sri Ramakrishna even said that this truthfulness itself is a tapasya for this modern age. And he even said that adhering to truth, one can attain God. That's why we see that, a great prayer, Sri Ramakrishna very often said that after my vision of Divine Mother, I prayed to her, taking a flower in my hand. Mother, here is my knowledge. Here is thy knowledge. Here is thy ignorance. Take them both and give me only pure love. Okay, here is good. Here is thy evil. Take them both. Mother, give me pure love. All those things. But then he said, I mentioned all these, but I could not say, Mother, here is thy truth. Here is thy falsehood. Take them both. I gave up everything at her feet, but could not bring myself to give up truth. So that is the value of truth. We see when we read the life of Sri Ramakrishna, how much he was conscious, how much truthful, even in his own mind, he was so much adherent to the principle of truth, kind of obsessive about being truthful. So there is a caution here about speaking truth. It comes in Manusmriti. Manusmriti says that Satyam Bruvat, Priyam Bruvat. Na Bruvat Satyam Apriyam. Priyam cha na Anrutam Bruvat. Esha Dharma Sanatana. It means speak the truth, speak pleasantly. Do not speak the truth in an unpleasant manner. And even if pleasant, do not speak untruth. This is the path of eternal righteousness. So that is something we have to think of, that through our speaking truth, am I violating ahimsa? Am I doing himsa, injuring others? So that can happen, through, being energized by the truth, we might sometimes hurt others. That is really happening nowadays very much in social media, which is called moral grandstanding. Moral grandstanding, that is, I am thinking I am morally superior to you. Okay, and so I shall shout at you. And I can go to any level to shut you down, to shut you up. Moral grandstanding, that is, the values that I am having is the only correct value. And that it has got no end, and it is creating a lot of problem. So those who are not, those who don't aggressive enough, they are getting shut off in social media. They are avoiding shut off. So social media is now a place of extremists on both sides of the aisle, whether it is liberal or conservative, because the middle ones who don't want to go into this kind of fights, they are quitting social media or becoming silent, which is not good. Anyway, the point is, in the spirit of speaking truth, we should also see that is my truth hurting others? Okay, because the earlier was ahimsa. Ahimsa is the first thing. So there is a story about that in Mahabharata. There is a sage. It's probably a well-known story. Most of you know. Still, let me tell this story. There was a sage who was sitting at a crossroad inside a forest. Okay, from where he was sitting, there were two paths going to two directions. So he suddenly saw one man running and went into took one of the paths, and then followed a group of people. They also came running and asked this sage that, have you seen a person running? He said, yes. And where did he go? Which path did he take? Now this sage was truthful. He had to tell the truth. So he correctly said which path the other person went. So these people followed and killed the person. The moral of the story was, it was being told by someone to someone else about dharma. So the sage, although spoke truth, but he committed violence, and that is adharma. So what he could have done, he could have said, yes, I know, but I won't tell. I know where he has gone, which path, but I won't tell. Okay. So that is the test of truthfulness, that although we are telling the truth, but also not hurting others. So that is to be remembered. So if we have ahimsa, if we are truthful, what we will find, that our mind is a transparent mind, mind of integrity, and they contribute to tranquility of the mind. Then, but again, as I said, these two were kind of via what they call negativa, not do this, don't tell a lie, don't do violence, but other things like niyama. These are do's. Do's are shaucha, cleanliness. Cleanliness is both external and internal. External, we understand, keeping our body, our clothes, our surroundings, our house clean. Okay. So why it matters? Because suppose we are clean, we have taken a shower, we have put on a fresh, new cloth, and also our surroundings are conducive. With such a mind, suppose I am now sitting for meditation. All of these have an effect of our mind, which we cannot deny at all. All of those things. So cluttered space affect our mind. Uncluttered, clear, and very clean, they have an effect of our mind. Especially, I have seen some of the monks of our order, their rooms, oh my God, nothing, nothing. So sometimes I used to get surprised. Of course, in a monk's room, there is hardly anything other than books. Okay. But some of our monks are so Spartan that even not a bed, okay, probably yes, lying down on floor. So I entered, there's nothing, a few books on the shelf, and only big pictures of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. So entering such a room, I felt like it is a shrine. It is not a living room. It's not a bedroom of someone. It is a shrine. Okay. So it has got an effect. And that is the reason we say that, keep a place or a room aside, which is clean, which is free from clutter. That is temple. So all these have effects on our mind, and we know that physical. But more important is mental cleanliness, mental purity. More important than external purity, because we can be lost in that, only maintaining external purity. Shaucha. So Garuda Purana gives a wonderful definition of shaucha, or cleanliness. It says there are 5 types of shaucham. Satta shaucham, tapah shaucham, shaucham indriya nigraha, sarva bhuta daya shaucham, jala shaucham cha panchamam. That is, speaking truth is purity. Tapas, living a disciplined life is purity. Indriya nigraha, that is, controlling our sense organs from being extrovert, keeping them under moderation. That is shaucham, that is purity. Then sarvabhuta daya shaucham, having compassion for everybody, that is purity. And 5th one is this with water, that is physical purity. And so that means all these qualities that we are going to, ahimsa, shaucha, sattva, these are all part of shaucha. So shaucha, in its ramifications, covered all kind of values in itself. Shaucha. And then, as we just read, daya, compassion. So compassion is It's a positive counterpart of ahimsa. Ahimsa alone is not enough. Ahimsa is kind of not, I won't injure others. It does not have a positive something in it. Okay. So positive part is compassion. Positive part is compassion. What is the definition of compassion? So we know in psychology they say compassion is a dynamic thing. Like they say empathy can be two types. One is I feel your pain, that is emotional empathy. Intellectual, that is I can understand, I can intellectualize what it might feel like. Although I am not feeling it, but I can intellectualize what it could be. That is called intellectual empathy. And finally, compassion. Compassion is not only I can feel what it feels like, what you are going through, the pain you are going through, but it has a dynamic aspect that what can I do? Not only I can feel, what can I do in that situation to alleviate your suffering? Okay, so that is compassion. Compassion has a dynamic aspect in it. Not only understanding, not only emotionally feeling, understanding or empathizing with you, but also dynamic aspect of it. Matsya Purana gives a wonderful definition of daya, compassion. It says, Atmavat sarva bhuteshu yo hitaya shubhaya cha vartate satatam vishtaha kriya hi esha daya spita. Happily doing unto others what feels good and beneficial for myself, that is called compassion. Okay, so whatever I feel good or what is beneficial to me, that kind of things I will be doing unto you. Okay, so the golden rule of dharma, do unto others as you would do to you. So that is I think a great way of understanding, daya, that it feels good for me when someone treat me this way. So let me treat me that way. It feels bad when I am treated like that, or I go through such situation and you are going through such situation. So I feel for you. And so doing things, okay, doing things which I feel good about myself and things which are beneficial to me. So I shall also do things for you so that you also feel good and things are beneficial to you. That is daya. But one thing important that we should remember, daya, compassion, we always think of for others. Okay. But it has been found that compassion starts with self-compassion. This is something we really take note of. Self-compassion is a great virtue that most of us miss out. We become compassionate to others, but we are not compassionate enough to us. That is, say my friend has come to me with some weakness or some problem. The way I treat my friend, I don't treat myself. Got me. So with the same kind of weakness, I treat someone, I am forgiving to someone, I am willing to forgive the mistakes or weakness or vulnerabilities of others. I am not that much forgiving for myself when I do some mistake, when I have some vulnerability. So we become too much hard on ourselves. And they have found that this is not good. This is not good. If we have compassion for ourselves, it has been found that we in fact, become more compassionate to others. More compassionate to others. So treat yourself as you would treat one of your friends. Okay. So we have done some mistake. We have some, say, weakness, have some vulnerabilities, and we are becoming extra hard on ourselves. We are feeling a sense of guilt, a sense of lamentation and regrets. But suppose I go to another person, to my friend, they will immediately can understand, and thing is common humanity. Common humanity. All human beings will have some mistakes, some weakness, some vulnerabilities. Okay. So when I am becoming extra hard on me, that is, I am thinking myself more perfect than others. More perfect than others. That's why I am becoming extra hard on itself. So the right attitude for a devotee is to think that we are not saints. We are not saints. And we have mistakes, we have vulnerabilities, we are not perfect beings. If we can have that kind of feeling, we shall have extraordinary humility, right kind of humility. This humility is born from a fact, real fact, that all of us have vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And none of us are saints here. Okay. So there is no problem in accepting my weakness. No problem accepting my weakness, which I don't know. Suppose I don't know. So what? Am I all-knowing? And in fact, just today I was reading, it is incidentally, I was reading in Atlantic newsletter that what is lacking most in America now is real friends. Real friends is lacking among the adult people. Why? Because friendship starts with vulnerabilities. Friends share their vulnerabilities. From there grows friendship. Okay. Yes, here is a real person who has problem. Here is not a perfect person, which is not real. Nobody is perfect. So to have friendship grows from accepting or acknowledging each other's vulnerability, which is unfortunately lacking in this culture. We are trying to show each other that I am strong, I have no problem, which is not a fact, And so in adulthood, we are finding tough to have real friends. So compassion is important, but one thing we miss out is self-compassion. Let us have self-compassion for others, telling every day to us that we are not perfect. We are not saints, we are devotees trying to get some amount of bhakti. Okay, we shall see that real humility will come in us. Real humility and real gratefulness, real, I would say, thankfulness, will fill our life. Thanksgiving will fill our heart. Next virtue he speaks about is astikya. Astikya traditionally defined as having faith in the Vedas, but it does not mean here. Astikya means faith in spirituality. That is, faith in a higher reality. Whatever conception of higher reality one might have, it is Atman, Brahman, a transcendental being, a God, a cosmic intelligence, whatever it is, having a faith or belief of existence of such a higher reality. That is called astikya, as opposed to materialism, which says there is all that meets our eye, that's it. There is no other existence, no other reality. That is materialism. And opposite to that is this astikya, having faith in spirituality. And we need not have absolute faith or need not trust faith on ourselves. Let us have a working faith. It's a working faith. that yes, I have not realized God, I have not seen Atman, I have not experienced Atman, I have not experienced Brahman, but we have read in books and about accounts of people who are trustworthy people. They had this kind of relation experiences. So let me have a working faith that it's possible. It's possible. And probably we shall experience that. That is called Astikya Buddhi. And I would say that the greatest contribution of Sri Ramakrishna in this for us is emphatic statement that God can be seen. I have seen God. You can too see God. Not in any intellectual terminology, not in philosophy. And that's what struck Swami Vivekananda so much. Swami Vivekananda was an intellectual, studied all philosophy, had this question, is there God? And he went to many teachers, many philosophers. Everybody, started beating around the bush. Sri Ramakrishna was the first person. First time meeting, Swami Vivekananda asked, Sir, have you seen God? First meeting, Sri Ramakrishna nonchalantly says, yes, I have seen God. You can see too. And he said, I have seen God as clear I am seeing you, only more clearer. Okay, that was something Swami Vivekananda was wonderstruck with. And of course, Swami Vivekananda was not convinced at that very moment. He started, experimenting. He started doing tests whether it is really so. And that is what I find. And in fact, that is the reason Narada said 2 aphorisms ago that Bhakti Shastrani Manoniyani. To keep our faith aflame, keep our faith burning until we ourselves experience at least a glimpse of that reality. We should keep on reading and contemplating on books which deal with bhakti. Those who want to cultivate bhakti, they should read and contemplate, assimilate, meditate on books related to lives of other bhaktas, lives of those who have realized God, for whom God was real. So to keep this astikya buddhi. Then he says adi. Adi means etc. That is such other virtues. You may say which other virtues? So we may say that other virtues which come in yama and niyama. For example, sadhaya. Sadhaya means studying very carefully with contemplating what we are studying. That is sadhaya. That of course Narada has already emphasized several times. So such other practices. If we do, so what is the summary of this aphorism? Summary of the aphorism is a devotee should try to uphold virtues like non-violence, truthfulness, cleanliness, compassion, and faith, which are conducive for tranquility and integrity of mind. With such a tranquil and integrated mind, Bhakti Yoga becomes highly beneficial. I see a lot of chats. Let me see. Is there any question? Yes. Ego is a factor in himsa. Yes, ego can make us, violent. We are expected to be severe with oneself and gentle with others. What are your thoughts on this? I also had this kind of thought till recently, until I came across this idea of self-compassion. And I first came across this idea of self-compassion in the book called Peace Pilgrim. There she speaks about, and which really surprised me, because it is all against anything I knew about. I thought we have to be, harsh with us, gentle with others. But then, anyway, another course I took, and then I all came about this idea of self-compassion. And it makes so much sense. It makes so much sense, self-compassion. What are the other chats, other question? What about feelings like anger, irritation, lack of compassion? We are all human beings and experiences God humanity from time to time. Yeah, it is quite natural to have anger, irritation, and lack of compassion. But we need to forgive ourselves and start all over again. Is the concept of working faith in spirituality similar to Pascal's wager? Can you repeat what book you mentioned for self-compassion? Oh, Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim is a booklet about an American lady's, walk all over the country to preach need of peace. So it's quite a spiritual book. Okay. Is the concept of working faith in spirit similar to Pascal's wager? I don't know Pascal's wager. What is Pascal's wager? So can you, okay, you can unmute yourself. And what is Pascal's wager? Unmute. Manishbhai, we have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Pascal is the 17th century French philosopher, theologian, mathematician, etc. Same Pascal. The argument is
Right.
that rational person should live as though God exists. The argument being, if God does not exist, then such a person will only have a finite loss of pleasure, etc. But if God exists, he stands to gain infinite gains and avoid infinite losses. So it's one of these philosophical arguments. So even if you do not believe in God, why take a chance? That's the argument. Because you stand to gain more if it turns out to be true. But if it's not false, you don't have much to lose. It's not quite the same, but I see some parallels.
Yes. Yeah. No, Narada is not philosophizing at all, anything about it. So he's simply speaking about faith, and we are interpreting it as a working faith. Okay. Narada takes it for granted that those who will be reading this book will have astikya buddhi, have faith in a existence of a higher reality. And there is no doubt about that all of us have some degree of faith or belief in a reality which is not tangible. Okay.
I had another question, if I may, since
Sure.
my mic is on. Holy Mother, and one of the famous lessons from her is, do not find fault with others if you want your mind to be at peace. Does that fit into one of these virtues? Maybe it's part of.
Yes, Holy Mother's entire advice was, don't find with others, rather see your own faults. Okay, so the point is here, it's not that we shall be always seeking our own faults. Okay, the Holy Mother, what she meant that instead of trying to see all the time, looking for faults in others, if we introspect, we shall find that we also have many of the faults, many other faults. Okay, so that will make us humble. Okay, that make us humble, and then we shall see that why to criticize others, those who have faults. And in fact, in psychology, they say there is a projection, projection, one ego defense mechanism that is called projection. I might have a fault within me which I cannot tolerate at all that I have that fault. But when I see that fault in others, I overreact.
Mm.
It is called over projection. Projection. Okay. So many times I have seen people who are, criticizing one fault in others. They might have that fault in abandon in themselves. And they cannot reconcile with the fact that this fault they are having. Okay. It is a kind of ego defense mechanism. Ego defense mechanism. So Holy Mother said, don't see fault in others. The more we see fault in others, the more we shall not be in a position to come together. But if we don't see others' fault and see our own fault, it will make us understand that faulting is erring, faulting is a very natural thing, very natural thing.
So we can find faults in ourselves, at the same time remain self-compassionate.
Exactly. So even with these faults, we can still remain compassionate. I mean, treat yourself as you will treat your friend. Okay. Why I am treating myself different? If your friend comes to you with this kind of fault, how do you do that? How do you treat that person? That means I am not treating my inner self as my friend. Okay. Of course, that is due to that is how society functions. Society functions. We are told from the childhood that this should not be done, that should not be done. So all those things weigh upon us and makes us hard on ourselves. But that does not serve any good. Okay. Serve any good. So Sri Ramakrishna also said, if you have understood that you have done some mistake or you have a fault, just reconcile with it, that yes, I have done this wrong. I will not do it again. I will try not to do it again. Okay. So he did not like repenting so much about, repenting so much about sin or a fault you have done. Okay, you have done. Just said we would try not to do again. Yes, fault finding with others indeed is a himsa, kind of himsa. It's a breeding ground for himsa. We need to recognize that it is human. Yeah.
Maharaj,
Yes.
in this aphorism, he talks about the yama niyama part of it. Does he talk about the dharana, dhyana, samadhi somewhere too? Or, because I don't recall.
No. In the entire Bhakti Yoga, we never find the idea of dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Okay. So Bhakti traditionally had never the component of dhyana, meditation in it, because either for two reasons. One was it was really a part of not bhakti, and or it could be it was understood that meditation will be there. Okay, it does not require a mention of meditation. Okay, and if we look at yama and niyama together constitute 10, but he here mentions only 4 of them, right? Ahimsa, satya, shaucha. Only 3 of them. Okay. He introduces daya, which is not in there. He also introduces astikya, which is not there. Okay. So we need not connect it directly to yama and niyama. Of course, Ishwar Pranidhana, surrender to God, that is always there in niyama. All right, so I think let us leave out the next aphorism. I thought I spent too much time on this aphorism. All right. So, okay, we shall do the guided meditation with just after a minute.